At Thanksgiving, my dad leaned back, sneered across the table. Still the family disappointment, huh? My mom didn't say a word, just gave that hollow little smile she used when pretending nothing was wrong. I finished my pie, and walked out without looking back. 2 weeks later, my brother called, panicked about his rent. I told him, maybe the disappointment's finally pulling back. Thanksgiving at my parents' house has always been a circus, not the fun kind with cotton candy and wonder, but the depressing traveling kind with 3 mangy animals and a tent held together by duct tape and false hope. Every year I showed up anyway, clinging to some pathetic optimism that maybe this time would be different. Maybe someone would ask about my job without turning it into ammunition. Maybe someone would acknowledge that I existed outside of family group texts and financial emergencies. The days started deceptively normal. The house reeked of burnt dinner rolls and cinnamon overload, Mom's signature holiday scents. She already cracked open the wine, which meant she was 2 glasses deep and running on autopilot. Dad had claimed his throne in the living room, screaming at the television like the quarterback could actually hear his coaching advice through the screen. Josh and Rachel arrived fashionably late, as always. They swept through the door with a grocery store pie and my 5-year-old nephew Levi perched on Josh's shoulders like they were auditioning for a heartwarming holiday commercial. Mom practically genuflected over that sad excuse for dessert, fawning over it like it was handcrafted by angels. Meanwhile, the gourmet cheesecake I'd brought, from a bakery where people literally queue for hours, sat abandoned on the counter like a beautiful, expensive afterthought. Josh had always been the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong even when he was doing everything wrong. He'd flunked out of 2 different majors in college, dropped out entirely, then landed a warehouse job through Dad's connections. He married Rachel, a woman who treats everyone like they're standing in her personal sunbeam, somehow expecting to be worshipped for the privilege. Despite this resume of mediocrity, he remained the family's success story. Meanwhile, I was pulling down 6 figures working remotely in a job I genuinely enjoyed, traveling internationally several times a year, completely debt-free, and somehow I was still the subject of their whispered concerns and sideways glances. Dinner unfolded with the familiar tension that only family gatherings can produce, everyone performing politeness while the air thick with unspoken resentments and passive-aggressive observations. I mostly listened, waiting for someone to show even mild curiosity about my life. I just returned from Spain the week before, but when I mentioned it casually, Rachel tilted her head like I'd announced I'd joined a doomsday cult. Must be nice, she said with that particular brand of saccharine venom she'd perfected. Just traveling all the time, never worrying about anyone but yourself. Josh's approving chuckle was enough to derail any hope of pleasant conversation for the rest of the meal. The food was aggressively mediocre, turkey drier than cardboard, stuffing that tasted like seasoned sawdust, gravy with the texture of lumpy concrete. But I ate anyway, knowing that if I didn't clean my plate, they'd accuse me of being dramatic or pretentious. I endured it all right up until dessert time, watching everyone devour Josh's store-bought pie like it was a Michelin-starred creation, while my untouched cheesecake continued its lonely vigil on the counter. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was savoring what I'd decided would be my final bite when my dad, without preamble or provocation, looked directly at me and delivered his verdict. Still the family disappointment, huh? He didn't say it with heat or malice, just stated it like he was commenting on the weather. Matter of fact. Conversational. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to object or at least look uncomfortable. Nobody flinched. Mom maintained that eerie smile, the one she deployed whenever she wanted to pretend nothing unpleasant had happened. Rachel was suddenly fascinated by something Levi was doing with his food. Josh was already reaching for a second slice of pie, acting like the comment had never been made. I didn't argue. Didn't defend myself. Didn't even speak. I simply stood up, grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. There was no need for theatrics. The silence behind me said everything that needed saying. Nobody followed. Nobody called out. Nobody seemed to care that I'd just been publicly humiliated and dismissed at what was supposed to be a family celebration. I drove back to my apartment, where I finally opened that abandoned cheesecake and gave it the appreciation it deserved. That night, sleep eluded me, not because I was angry, though I had been initially, but because I'd finally recognized the truth I'd been avoiding for years. They didn't respect me. Not even a little bit. Sure, I was useful. I'd helped Josh secure the apartment he was living in. I maintained appropriate distance when they needed space. I never asked for help or created drama. But respect? Care? Basic human decency? Those were apparently reserved for everyone else in the family. That night, I made a decision that would reshape everything. I was done playing the role they'd written for me. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Josh's name appeared on the screen, the first time he'd contacted me since Thanksgiving. "Why did my rent bounce?" he demanded without preamble. I let the silence stretch for a few beats before responding. "Maybe the disappointment's finally pulling back." He didn't laugh. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then his voice escalated, sharp with disbelief and growing rage. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." That's when Josh truly lost control. He didn't even attempt to hide his fury, his voice climbing to a shout as he launched into a tirade about how I was being cold, arrogant, and selfish. He accused me of changing, as if personal growth was some kind of character flaw. I let him vent, listening to him cycle through complaints about Levi, about Rachel's reduced work hours, about mounting bills and financial pressure. Then he deployed the word that was supposed to end all arguments. "We're family, Nate. You don't do this to family." That's when I delivered the news that would alter our relationship forever. "Starting next month, rent's going up to $1,500. Another silence. Then a small, sarcastic laugh from his end. "You serious?" "Dead serious." I calmly explained that the apartment had been fully renovated and that $1,500 was still significantly below market rate for a 2-bedroom unit in that building. I'd been giving him what amounted to charity for far too long. "A break? You call that a break? You've been paying $500 a month for 4 years, Josh. That's not a break, that's practically a gift. You couldn't rent a shared basement room for that amount in this zip code." He accused me of screwing over a family with a young child. Said he thought I had a heart. Then he hung up on me. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with an incoming text barrage from Rachel. Wall after wall of emotional manipulation, full of guilt-inducing phrases like, "Levi doesn't deserve this," and "I thought you loved your nephew," and "We'll end up homeless if you keep pushing." But it was her final message that crystallized everything. "You wouldn't be making this change if we were your family." That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. I didn't reply. I didn't call back. I didn't feel any need to explain or justify my decision further. For 4 years, I'd been playing the nice guy. I'd given them the apartment at a massive loss, even though I'd originally planned to rent it at market rate. They'd begged me not to list it publicly, claiming they just needed temporary help until they got back on their feet. That was 4 years and countless empty promises ago. 3 days later, Josh appeared at my door without warning, pounding like he owned the building. When I opened it, he was red-faced and breathing heavily. "You're actually doing this? You're raising the rent 3 times over just like that?" It was actually more than 3 times, but I didn't feel the need to correct his math. Instead, I asked him calmly what he thought would be fair. "Fair? We have a child. You knew we were barely making it, and you decide to pull the rug out from under us. You disgust me." I repeated my position, $1,500 or find somewhere else. He scoffed, launching into a lecture about how my little remote job and vacation lifestyle didn't make me superior to anyone. Then he made a critical error in judgment. "You wouldn't survive a month if you didn't have that damn salary. You think it makes you special? You've always been a joke." I looked him directly in the eye and said, "New rent's $2,500. His jaw actually dropped open. He laughed like I was bluffing, but my expression made it clear I wasn't. He stormed out, muttering something about lawyers, but we both knew there was no lease. It had all been verbal agreements, which I'd structured that way specifically to be accommodating. Trust had made me an idiot. I thought that would be the end of our confrontation, but a few days later, I discovered something that made my blood run cold, and the revelation didn't even come from Josh directly. I was at a coffee shop near my apartment, sitting by the window and half listening to 2 women at the adjacent table discussing rent prices in the area. One of them mentioned my building specifically. I wasn't really paying attention until she said something that made my ears perk up. Apparently, she just heard about a unit in the same complex that was renting for $3,400 a month. She was amazed that someone in her building was getting the exact same layout for $500. Her friend laughed. "Yeah, that's the guy who's got some kind of deal with the owner. I heard from his wife that the brother's rich and stupid, just gives them the place out of guilt." I froze. Sorry, did you say Rachel? They looked surprised, but one nodded. Yeah, she lives with her husband and kid on the 5th floor. You know her? Unfortunately. I left without finishing my drink. By the time I reached home, I was seething, not just about the money, but about the narrative they'd constructed. I was some oblivious idiot they were exploiting, so wealthy I didn't understand the value of money, handing out apartments like party favors. I pulled up my text history and scrolled through years of half-hearted thank yous and vague promises that things would improve soon. I thought about all the times I'd been told to be patient, that they were almost financially stable, that next year would be different. And now Rachel was out there bragging about their secret arrangement like I was some clueless ATM they'd learned to manipulate. I'd never told anyone else what they were paying, not because I was ashamed, but because I genuinely didn't want them to feel embarrassed. I'd kept it quiet to protect their dignity. And they'd used my discretion to feed their own self-serving story. I sent Josh a single text. You've got 2 weeks to move out. That's the end of it. He called immediately. I let it ring. Then he called again and again. Finally, I answered. What the hell are you talking about? You heard me. You're evicting us? There's no lease. You're not a tenant, you're a guest. And guests don't talk behind the backs of the people giving them shelter. He started shouting again, claiming I was overreacting, that Rachel didn't mean anything by it. He actually tried to blame the woman from the cafe, suggesting I should be angry at her for eavesdropping instead of furious at them for their betrayal. You've got 2 weeks. I repeated, then hung up. Rachel appeared at my door the next day. She didn't knock, just stood outside buzzing my apartment until I opened the door. She immediately launched into tears and pleading, insisting she didn't mean for her comments to sound that way, that everything had been taken out of context. I asked her one direct question. Did you or did you not tell people I was giving you the place because I'm rich and stupid? She didn't answer. Just stood there looking cornered and desperate. Josh pulled up minutes later and told her to get in the car. He didn't even make eye contact with me as they drove away. Later that night, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and that's when I realized just how extensive this family conspiracy had become. When Mom called, I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. She started soft, as if nothing dramatic had happened, asking how I was doing and mentioning some new casserole recipe she was experimenting with. Then, after a calculated pause, she eased into her real purpose. Josh told us you're kicking them out. Is that true? I confirmed it was. Nathan, you can't just throw a family with a child out on the street. You have to be reasonable. I didn't respond immediately. Then I asked her how much she thought rent typically cost in that building. She guessed wildly low. I corrected her with the actual market rate. Then I asked how much Josh had been paying. $500, she said quietly. She went silent for a moment. I thought maybe she finally understood the scope of what I'd been doing for them, but her voice returned firmer than before. So you've been fine with that amount for years, and now suddenly you want to triple it? Why now? I told her the truth, that I'd overheard Rachel describing me as an idiot they were exploiting, that they'd been leeching off me while mocking me behind my back, that I'd tolerated it for too long and was finally done. She didn't take it well. That's just family talk, Nathan. We all say things we don't mean. You can't let one slip-up ruin everything. It wasn't one slip-up, I said firmly. She spent another 5 minutes trying to guilt-trip me, claiming I was being vindictive, that Josh was going through a difficult time, that Rachel was just emotional and didn't mean any harm. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. Your father and I think it might be best if you reconsidered. Maybe let them stay at least until spring. I asked why she was involving Dad in this decision, and she told me something I absolutely hadn't expected. He co-signed the original loan for that apartment, didn't he? My heart stopped for a second. No, he didn't. I paid the down payment myself. I got the mortgage myself. I signed every document. I told you about it the day I closed. Are you sure about that? She hesitated. Well, he always felt like he should have had some say in what happened to it. He helped you with advice and support when you were looking. So now they were just manufacturing involvement that had never existed. After that call, my phone started ringing constantly. My uncle called. Then my cousin. Then even a neighbor I hadn't heard from in years who had apparently been recruited by Rachel. Each one delivered some version of the same message. Don't make waves, don't cause trouble, it's just money, let it go. It was surreal, being gaslit by an entire network of people who had never contributed a cent toward that apartment, never helped me scrape together the down payment, never once asked if I was okay or what I needed. Then something even more disturbing happened. My old friend Kim sent me a screenshot. Rachel had posted a lengthy, vague status on Facebook, one of those passive-aggressive paragraphs about being betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect her family, and how blood doesn't always guarantee loyalty. The post was flooded with sympathetic comments, people offering spare rooms and asking if Levi was safe. In the replies, she'd hinted that they were being forced out by someone. Jealous of our happiness. Jealous. That word made my blood boil. I pulled out my laptop, logged into the building's management portal, and drafted an official notice of eviction. 2 weeks. I hand-delivered it the next morning without saying a word. Josh wasn't home. Rachel answered the door in sweatpants, holding Levi. She accepted the paper without looking at it. I turned to leave, but she said something under her breath that stopped me cold. You'll regret this. I looked over my shoulder. Will I? 2 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photograph of my apartment door, the one I owned, with the word thief carved deeply into the wood with something sharp. Just like that, this stopped being about rent. I stared at that photograph for a long time, not because I was shocked, I wasn't, but because it confirmed something I'd quietly suspected. They weren't just angry anymore. They wanted war. The word thief had been gouged right into the wood below the peephole, deep and aggressive, definitely not done with a key or coin but with something much sharper and more deliberate. The strangest part was that no one had reported the vandalism. Not the neighbors, not building management. I called the front office, and the girl on the line said no one had mentioned any damage to Unit 5D. I knew why. Josh had probably done it himself or allowed it to happen, then coached 5-year-old Levi to keep quiet about it. That kid wasn't stupid, just easily manipulated. That night, I drove to their building and parked outside for an hour, waiting and watching. Rachel left with Levi, heading toward her car without noticing me. 10 minutes later, Josh emerged with a trash bag. I got out and followed him. He jumped when he saw me, probably expecting me to swing at him. I held up the photograph. Want to explain this? He didn't even pretend to be surprised. Guess you got what you wanted. What I wanted? You think you're the victim here, Nate? You think because you make a little money and let us live in that shoebox, you get to control our lives? I told him he had 2 days left to vacate, and now had the added bonus of paying for a new door. He laughed. Good luck proving I did anything. I didn't need to prove it. Building management had just installed new hallway cameras 2 weeks earlier. They weren't fully operational yet, but he didn't know that. His smirk faltered slightly. I turned and walked back to my car, but not before adding. New couple's already signed a lease. They move in on the 15th. $3,000 a month. No headaches. He didn't respond. 2 days later, Josh and Rachel still hadn't moved out. No boxes in the hallway, no movers, just defiant silence. I filed official eviction paperwork with the city. They had 7 days after that before law enforcement could be involved. My lawyer walked me through the entire process. I was completely protected. No lease meant no formal tenant rights. They were guests who had overstayed their welcome. That evening I received a text from Mom. Please don't do this. They're packing. They'll leave. Just give them more time. I didn't reply. Then she added something unsettling. Your father says you might need to be careful. Josh isn't handling this well. 2 hours later, I heard a noise outside my apartment window. Not in the hallway, directly outside my third-floor window. There's a fire escape there, and someone was on it. I grabbed my phone and turned off all the lights, then quietly crept into the kitchen and peered through the blinds. There was definitely a shadow moving, a crouched figure by the window. I threw the window open fast and yelled loudly. The shape jolted and scrambled back down the fire escape ladder. I didn't see the face clearly, but I knew. The next morning, I filed a police report, provided them with a photograph of the vandalized door, and described the incident on the fire escape. I didn't directly accuse anyone, didn't need to, but I did CC Josh on the email I sent to the police. That night, the movers finally appeared. Boxes, shouting, Levi crying, Rachel barking orders, Josh maintaining sullen silence. They cleared out by midnight. The next morning, I went over with the keys to inspect what they'd left behind. The place was completely trashed. Scuff marks scarred the walls, cabinets hung open, carpet was torn in one corner, and Levi's handprints were smeared across the sliding glass door in what appeared to be peanut butter. They didn't leave a note, just a single receipt on the kitchen counter from a hardware store. One item purchased, wood carving tool. Standing in that destroyed apartment, I didn't even feel angry anymore. There was something almost poetic about it, the way they'd demolished everything like children smashing toys they didn't want anyone else to enjoy. The receipt was tucked under the kitchen light switch, one item, wood carving tool, paid in cash. It was petty, but I kept it as evidence. I emailed photographs of the damage to my building manager. He responded within the hour, already approving a contractor to replace the door and repair the damage. I paid the $900 bill out of pocket, knowing I'd recover that money somehow, maybe not legally, but somehow. The new tenants moved in 4 days later, a young couple from Colorado who'd relocated for work. They were polite, enthusiastic, and appreciative. They saw the apartment for what it truly was, renovated, spacious, and fairly priced. They signed the $3,000 lease without hesitation, wiring first and last month's rent before I even handed over the keys. I gave them a bottle of wine as a welcome gift. They sent me a thank you photo, a smiling selfie by the same window Josh had once covered with a blanket to block out the light. The apartment felt clean again, not just physically but energetically, like an oppressive weight had been lifted from the entire building. I assumed it was over. I was wrong. The calls started again, this time beginning with my father instead of my mother. "You went too far," he declared. He didn't mention the fire escape incident or ask about the vandalized door or apologize for pretending he had any ownership stake in my property. He simply said I should have let them stay until Levi finished the school year. Then came texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years, a former coworker from college, someone I'd known from church growing up, even a woman I'd gone on exactly 2 dates with 5 years ago. All delivering variations of the same message. I was cold, heartless, and selfish. Rachel had been busy. She'd written lengthy posts across multiple platforms, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, several local forums, tagging them with phrases like family betrayal, unjust eviction, and greedy landlord brother. She'd conveniently omitted the actual rent amount, the fact that no lease had ever existed, and the part where her husband had possibly climbed a fire escape to intimidate me in my own home. But she had posted Levi's picture, claiming he cried every night, and asked why Uncle Nathan didn't love them anymore. For a moment, it almost worked. For a split second, it almost got to me. Then I remembered what I'd overheard in that cafe. Rich and stupid, jealous of our happiness. Thief, carved into my property. No. I didn't owe them anything. A few days after the new tenants settled in, I ran into Rachel at the grocery store. She was pushing a cart loaded with frozen meals and holding Levi's hand. He waved at me with innocent enthusiasm. I waved back. Rachel stared at me like I was a stranger who'd keyed her car in a parking lot. Then she said quietly, "You sleep okay now?" I smiled. "Better than ever." According to family gossip, they're living with my parents now. Rachel's still working part-time, and Josh has started some kind of side business flipping sneakers online. Apparently it's not going well. I haven't spoken to either of them since, and I won't. But every month, that $3,000 payment arrives like clockwork. Direct deposit, clean, no guilt, no drama. And every time I see that deposit, I think to myself, still the family disappointment, huh? It's remarkable how quiet life becomes once you remove the noise. 6 months have passed without a single text from Josh or Rachel. No late-night phone calls. No snide comments. No passive-aggressive Facebook posts with captions like, "Some people only love you when you're useful." That particular post stayed up for 2 months before she finally deleted it. The new tenants are thriving. They're a young couple from Colorado who moved here for work, incredibly polite, always pay early, and they even sent me a thank you gift basket in December filled with wine, gourmet snacks, and a handwritten card saying, "Thanks for giving us a fresh start in our new city." They also finally got someone to fix the balcony lights that Josh had insisted weren't his responsibility for 4 years. The apartment feels truly alive now, filled with plants, decorated with art, brightened by a cheerful yellow doormat that says, "Come back with tacos." Something Rachel would have dismissed as tacky, but it makes me smile every time I see it. As for Josh and Rachel, I haven't heard anything directly, but family gossip suggests they're still living with my parents. One of my cousins mentioned at a birthday party that Josh's sneaker flipping venture isn't profitable and Rachel's working part-time at a dental office reception desk. They've applied for 2 different rentals and been rejected from both due to credit score issues. Mom hasn't called since January. Dad reached out once in February asking if I'd consider a brief phone conversation with Josh to talk things through. I ignored it completely. There's nothing left to discuss. But then something unexpected happened last week. I checked my mailbox expecting the usual bills and promotional flyers, and instead found a thick envelope with familiar, messy handwriting on the front. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of white paper and a drawing in crayon. The drawing was a rough sketch: a tall building, a stick figure with a beard, a smaller figure holding its hand, a bright yellow sun in the corner, and a heart floating above both heads. At the top, written in giant, uneven letters, Uncle Nate. No letter, no explanation, no manipulation. Just that drawing, clearly from Levi. I stood in my hallway holding it for a long time. It caught me completely off guard, more than anything else in this entire saga. It didn't ask for anything, didn't try to guilt me, didn't come with strings attached. It was just a picture from a kid who remembered that I existed and maybe, despite everything, still cared about me. I didn't frame it or analyze its deeper meaning. I simply walked into my kitchen, grabbed a magnet, and stuck it to my refrigerator. Every time I walk past it now, I glance at that simple drawing, not with regret or sadness, but with a strange combination of peace and clarity. Because no matter what the adults in this family think of me, no matter what they whisper or post online or complain about to anyone who will listen, that kid understood exactly who I was. And somehow, that's enough.